Being part of DLE has been a great experience for me. I met so many people from all over the world, and I get to make content for a game I love to play. And now that we're YouTube superstars, people often ask me how DLE got started. Most of the time I give a quick, abridged version of the story, but one time I sat and thought about it for a little bit, and I realized that the DLE you know today owes its existence to one deck. Without this one deck, we would not have been able to assemble the crack team of content creators you know and love. What deck is it, you ask? Well, believe it or not, well, wait a minute. It might be easier if I go all the way back to the beginning. A little over 3 years ago, I started streaming on Twitch. As you guys know, it was a little rough in the beginning, but eventually I became a tournament organizer. Each week I hosted a non-meta tournament. It gained popularity throughout the competitive community, and it was known as a good place to chill after a week of playing meta tournaments. Again, it wasn't the biggest tournament around, but it helped me become known in the community, and that recognition helped me land a job as a caster for the competitive league known as Team Wars. Each week I would cast a game with a different co-host. It was always a lot of fun meeting new people and streaming to a much larger audience. And then one day near the end of the season, it happened. I was chosen to cast a playoff game. It was an honor because not everyone got to cast the playoffs. They paired me up with a co-caster that I knew in name only, Kamel. To say Kamel and I killed it would be an understatement.
Oh my god, he has Crane. It's not a target, that's it. That's it!
We had never worked together before, but the stream was so good that we were given 2 more playoff games to cast. Each of those, of course, were just as good as the first. Coincidentally, we were casting the playoff games for our boy PDS's team, Forbidden Memories. After the season was over, I contacted Kamel about a show idea I had. Before meeting Kamel, I had been doing a show on Sunday nights on Twitch where I would sit and talk about Duel Links and anything else that I thought was cool, music, movies, anime, etc. I asked Kamel if he'd want to join the show, and we could revamp it to focus entirely on Duel Links and everything happening in the Twitch Duel Links community. He agreed, a little confused at first, but that's how the show that would become End-Phase was born. Each week on End-Phase, we would discuss everything that happened in the game as well in the Twitch community. We talk about news, updates, new decks, league play, tournaments, anything that happened in the past week. We'd get together earlier in the week to plan out what we would talk about. Now at this time, Kamel was a tournament organizer also, and one of the people he worked with started attending our planning meetings, and that person was PDS. PDS was our insider into the Duel Links community. Anytime we needed information or help with something, PDS would say, "I got a guy." End-Phase continued on week after week. Each week we'd bring in guests and talk to them about different subjects, and that's how we came across -1. I was familiar with Neg from the non-meta tournaments I hosted, as well as from Team Wars games. And in the beginning, when we were looking for guests, most of the time people would just politely decline or just not answer us altogether. But Neg was always happy to come on the show and give us a player's perspective on the game. When I say that Neg was on half our shows back then, I'm not exaggerating. It was through these segments on the show that we realized that Neg was going to be a top player in the community, and we'd have to exploit him as much as possible. Obviously, I'm just kidding. We were just happy to have someone with such insight into the game on the show. In around the same time frame, Kamel and I were also casting games for Clan Wars each week. I believe it was during the first game I casted that I asked the chat if there was anyone that could make a PNG for me. And one person answered, and that person was Gian Stranger. Once I received the PNG from Gian, I told him that I was going to keep sending him work. He laughed a little bit and said, "Sure." And I've kept my promise. Almost 3 years later, and Gian is doing almost all the graphics and overlays that you see on our YouTube and Twitch channels. Without Gian, we definitely wouldn't look as sexy as we do today. Okay, so let's do a quick recap. So far, we have the talent, the fixer, the expert, and the artist. But we're still missing the last 2 key pieces of the puzzle. Now, that deck I talked about is coming up soon, I promise. We just got to cover a few more things first. Eventually, End-Phase became a Sunday night staple for a lot of people. It became popular enough that we decided to start doing other shows on the channel. Oh, and the channel, I almost forgot. This whole time, everything we did was on my personal Twitch channel. So we decided to start a new channel and brand ourselves as Duel Links Entertainment. To celebrate, we hosted a tournament and PDS threw down a large prize donation for it. The tournament did so well that we decided to do it weekly. And that's how Battle Phase was born. Okay, now we can finally get to that mystery deck. So on End Phase, one segment we like to do on the show was deck learning. Anytime a new deck came out, we would have someone that was an expert or enthusiast come on and explain the deck, and we'd play a few games on the ladder. This segment was a lot of fun. Most of the time the deck was so new, even the so-called expert wouldn't know all the optimal plays. During this time period, the Valhalla Calling box came out, and that box was the deck I've been alluding to, and that deck was Cardians. Yup, Cardians. How did Cardians help DLE? Well, we had a young upstart named Herf come on and teach us how to play the deck. The segment was so much fun that I decided I wanted to do a separate show with Herf, and that show was Garbage Phase. Each week on Garbage Phase, we'd play decks like Cardians or Stall or OTK, FTK, anything that could be considered degenerate. As you can imagine, this show was a blast. We lost like 90% of the time, but the 10% of the time that we did win was so sweet. The way Herf got so excited when we would win without letting our opponent play definitely cast him as the villain on the channel. And it was on Garbage Phase that the last piece of the puzzle was added to DLE. Now the whole time DLE was going on, our boy Rye was streaming on his own channel. Rye had become known as the Noble Knights guy in the community. He'd actually been a guest on End Phase previously. He had cast a Team Wars game and came on to talk about it. But his real connection to DLE had come through Herf. Rye and Herf were playing on a competitive team together, and one night before Garbage Phase, Herf said, "Hey, Rye's coming on." I said, "The Noble Knights guy?" Rye had so much fun that night that we asked him back for the next week, then the next week, and the next week. Eventually, he was a full-time member of the show. And it wasn't too long after that we held a meeting and Rye said, "You know guys, if we focus our efforts, we could really take this somewhere." Rye had a whole list of ideas and changes we could make. And that was the meeting where Rye took his place as the Motivator. So in the months that followed that meeting, we started implementing the changes to DLE. We canceled a few shows and focused on tournaments on Twitch, and then opened a YouTube channel with daily uploads. And that's where things currently stand. And you might say Cardians weren't that important, that perhaps things might have come together eventually in a different way, and perhaps they could have, but I'm a big believer that things happen for a reason, that without that exact set of circumstances, things could have been very different. Without Cardians, I would never have met Herf, and maybe we don't start Garbage Phase. Without Garbage Phase, I never meet Rye, and maybe Rye becomes bored with streaming and retires from it altogether and we never meet. Who knows? To go even deeper, who would have thought that when Cardians were originally made for the TCG, that they would eventually be adapted to Duel Links, and because of that, I meet Herf. Now, I'm not trying to put too much importance on Rye and Herf here, but a project like DLE is only as good as the sum of its parts. Everyone in DLE adds something special that only they can add. It's because of the unique views and talents of each of its members that DLE has risen to the point that it has. DLE was doing well before we added Herf and Rye, but now DLE is complete. And that's what makes it special, and that's why we're doing so well. And as I sit here and write this, I realize that really the last component of DLE wasn't adding Herf and Rye, but it's you, the audience. Without you watching our content, none of it matters. We can host all the tournaments we want. We can release videos every day, but if no one watches them, they might as well not even exist. And that's what makes DLE so great. We make the content, you enjoy it, and together we grow this into something that we all can be proud to be a part of. So in the end, we all owe Cardians a big debt of gratitude, because without them, none of us would be here.